good evening, everyone. I've sort of said that already, but welcome to the Loudoun Museum. The museum was established here in 1967 by a group of Loudoun citizens dedicated to history and interpretation. And as we continue to strive to fulfill our role as a repository for Loudoun's history, our mission really is to discover and conserve and interpret and disseminate knowledge of Loudoun's culture and history and treasures. So I'm Carrie Christoffersen. I'm the executive director here. I'm officially past being a newcomer, having been here in this position about a year and a half. But I'm relishing learning more and more about Loudoun County and our history with every passing day. And that impulse to keep learning about our history, coupled with the suggestion of one of our long-standing volunteers, Martin Gordon, is what brought about the idea for our conversation this evening. And with that, I want to introduce our guest for the evening, Buddy Rizer. Buddy serves as the Executive Director for Economic Development in Loudoun County and has been part of the Economic Development team since 2007, having his 17th anniversary just last week.
That's right.
The agency is responsible for encouraging growth and developing relationships with Loudoun's business community in both the commercial and the agricultural sectors. Mr. Rizer's garnered many accolades during his time with the team, and he has been named a Tech Titan 7 times by Washingtonian Magazine, has been identified as one of the 50 most influential Virginians 6 times by Virginia Business Magazine, plus a 4-time member of their Virginia's Power 500, and 3 times has been included in the Washington Business Journal's Power 100 as one of the most influential business people in Washington. Now, Mr. Rizer also serves in the community in many ways. He's the chair of the Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance, a member of the Board of Trustees for the Northern Virginia Community College, and secretary of the Go Virginia Region 7 Council. This is by no means an exhaustive list of his contributions and accolades, but please join me in welcoming Mr. Rizer to the museum this evening.
Thank you. First of all, it's great to be here. I love the Loudoun Museum. A quick story. My kids were here a couple of weeks ago for the Revolutionary Riddle.
Oh, great.
I have 11-year-old twin boys, and they are history buffs, I mean, to the nth degree. They love Revolutionary history. They love Civil War history. So they saw that program. But then they came home and they said, "Daddy, did you know you're going to be speaking at the Loudoun Museum?" And I said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I did know that." So they were quite. It might be the first time they've been impressed with me, in their 11 years. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great to hear. Well, they'll have lots to engage in, especially in the next few years as we really ramp up toward the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. There's going to be lots and lots of programming. So as we get started, though, I just wanted to start by saying, we know Loudoun County's history is tied to its land, its people, its location. And as we look back, even to the 18th century, the rich soil, the abundant streams, the innovation of its people have made agriculture an economic engine of the county. And then we fast forward to this era that we're in, and the same innovation impulse presents itself, but in new ways. So I just wanted to start by asking, what does the term data center alley mean to you?
Well, data center alley was actually a marketing term. When I was trying to brand us, Loudoun County, as a technology location, we were trying to think through, well, what would make sense? And the internet is really housed in a place over right off of Loudoun County Parkway in Waxpool, in sort of an alley. So we started calling the area around that data center alley. If I would have known it was going to blow up to be the thing it is today, I probably would have put a little more time into calling it something else. But it's now a worldwide brand. It's known everywhere. It is the largest concentration of data centers anywhere in the world by a lot. When you start thinking about the biggest tech locations in the world, you automatically think about Silicon Valley and Frankfurt, Germany, and London and Paris and places like that. But really on top of all of them is Loudoun County, Virginia, which is kind of funny.
Right. I have read that about 70% of the world's data passes through the DC area daily.
Yeah, it's a very significant number for sure.
Okay.
We haven't done that study in a long time, but the reason why that is not just because of the data centers, but also the most important internet exchange point in the United States is here, and it's where all of the different networks around the globe connect. So really, this is the pathway through which data goes from here to all over the world. So it is an important routing area here.
All right. So taking us back to maybe before when you settled on Alley as an okay thing to start with,
Mm-hmm.
how did the notion of creating, a co-location for so much of the world's data centers in Loudoun County come about?
Well, I think context is going to matter, right? Because when I started here, Loudoun's economy wasn't in a great place. Think about what was going on with the Great Recession at the time. 81% of Loudoun's tax base was based on residential real estate. So when the housing bubble burst, we lost about a third of our tax revenue. So we were struck, and so I was brought in with the charge of growing the commercial tax base. The target they set for me was 23%. If we could go from 19% to 23%, we thought that would be successful. A lot of things had to happen. We laid off county employees, which seems unimaginable today, but we laid people off. We cut back on services and delayed capital projects and raised the tax rate all the way up to $1.285. So we were kind of in a desperate way to try to come up with something that would return cash quickly to the county. And I did some research and did some studying, looked at all of our assets, and decided that I wanted to target data centers, and really not like we see it today, but I was targeting those 3 buildings that were built before the tech bubble burst and sat empty for 10 years on Loudoun County Parkway and the Greenway, the digital realty buildings. So I thought, if I can fill those 3 buildings, I'll be doing really well. So I went out and got my certification in data center operations to understand what they were looking for. We created some programming around that, and we were really the first market to go out and proactively attract data centers. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, and I think I got pretty lucky being at the right place at the right time with the right idea. As we sit here today, we have the lowest tax rate in Northern Virginia. We've lowered the tax rate by 42 cents on the dollar over the last decade and a half, and that's never happened anywhere before. We went from a place where we were overly dependent on residential to a point where you could almost argue that we're not dependent enough on residential. Best case scenario is you want about 60% of your tax base in residential, 40% in commercial, and we're about 50-50 right now. So it's not a bad problem to have. We'll get about $1 billion from data centers this year, and it's really been a game changer for our economy.
All right. When you look at sort of the long game, and you said, you started with targeting these 3 buildings that had been empty for a while, what kind of role did the establishment of AOL in the region have in making that fertile ground for data centers to plant?
Well, I mean, it really helped us on a couple of levels. The first level is, we had all these technology workers here. AOL brought so many technology workers here. And you have to remember, back in those days, I mean, For many people, the internet was AOL, and AOL was the internet, right?
Right.
And so that was really significant. But probably the more meaningful thing was that because AOL was here and they moved here in 1997, soon after came WorldCom, and then after that, they moved the Internet Exchange Point from Tyson's Corner to Loudoun County to be closer to AOL because we were all using dial-up, right? We were all, screeching and calling and using the dial-up. So you wanted the other side to be as close and as latent as you could to their servers. So AOL built their first data center here, and the Internet Exchange Point was here. That put more fiber in the ground here than anywhere else in the world, and that was a very significant selling point when I was out there trying to attract data centers to Loudoun County.
Great. And so then when we think about that, so that sort of lays some groundwork, literally and figuratively, I guess. But what other organizations or factors helped the data centers come to root here? I'm thinking even as far back as ARPANET, right?
Yeah. Well, and most of that work was done here. ARPANET created the internet here, and you had a bunch of people that were really smart that were putting together this idea of a network, of a communications network. And when they did the first peering exchange point in Tyson's, it was almost by an accident that they decided to go out and get a bunch of Cisco connections and put everything together, and then everyone started going, this is working, started making that, getting that momentum. So that helped. I also think that, our location helped. I think that, having the international airport here, having a lot of land and available power, having a reclaimed water line here was a big selling point, because that was something that was very significant to data centers because it was greener, it saved them money on connection fees. It was really an important selling point. So we kind of packaged all of that together along with, our quality workforce, and it made a pretty compelling story.
Great. And can you think about other factors that, sort of went into the making of the sort of all of it coming together to move beyond those three buildings that you started with, right?
Yeah, for me it was, I put together a slide that I still have in my slide deck today. It's land, it's fiber, it's business environment, it's workforce. All of these things have to come together. Business environment was really important, and we didn't have a great reputation as a business-friendly community back in those days, and we hadn't done a lot of business work. So we needed to really think through how do we make sure that time to market can be predictable and that the process can be predictable. And so we went to great lengths to create that environment. I worked with the Senate and some of the stakeholders, and we created the first real data center sales tax incentive on the state level. And today 35 different states have that same sales tax incentive. So that environment was really important. And just on a side note, other than the sales tax incentive at the state level, we haven't incentivized any data centers to come here financially. So, I think that that's important to note. But we needed a good partner in the power company, and Dominion stood up a data center practice that made it a lot better. Loudoun Water was a very key group in this, and really, the fiber providers were really important. But I really think that without the support of the local government, without the help of everyone coming together, that this probably doesn't happen the way that it did.
Now, I've heard you talk about workforce, and obviously space, and now the the openness of government and business to participate. What factor does weather have in all of this?
Well, I mean, our geographic environment is definitely something that's a positive. It's hard. Like there are more data centers in Loudoun County than in the entire state of Florida. And that's, because of the hurricanes. It was for a long time, it was tough to do data centers in places where there was frequent droughts. Energy cost is an important part of it. And the environment is an important part of it. But I would say, really, it's one of those things that's on the list, but isn't necessarily at the top of the list. As long as you're not in an earthquake zone, and I know we had one a few years back.
We did, right?
But as long as you don't have that, you don't have a history of storms and losing power. I mean, we haven't really lost power in any significant way in the county in, I bet, 10 years. So all those things play into it, and it's all important. But the industry has evolved. When I first started going out and talking to companies, I was carrying around paper maps, right? One of the paper maps was the flight paths of Dulles Airport, because no one wanted to be under the flight paths. They thought that there was a risk in that, so they didn't want to do that. The other one was gas lines. They didn't want to be anywhere close to gas lines, again, because they thought that was a risk. Today they don't care at all if they're under a flight path, and they actually will pay a premium to be near a gas line. Because now with the energy challenges, being able to use gas as a backup or gas as the primary instead of a diesel generator or those kinds of things is very, it's something that everyone is now desirous of. So, it's an evolution. And I talk about, the industry, and in reality, this industry is only 20 years old as we know it today.
Right.
Which, if you've been in Loudoun, you think, oh, it's been here forever, but it's really about 20 years old. And so, we're still on the early part of that evolution, I think.
Great. And so, how many data centers are in Loudoun at this point?
Yeah, it's hard because you'll see one of these big buildings and there's actually 4 data centers in there. So it's hard to count data centers, but there's about 180 buildings, about 33.5 million square feet. So pretty significant. It's about 8% of the total land in Loudoun is controlled by data centers. Which seems like a lot until you think they're providing about a quarter of all the tax revenue. So, but yeah, it's significant.
Great, good to understand. Yeah, those are good numbers to be able to compare, right?
Yeah.
To have some comprehension on. Let's see. I feel like with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, it prompted many of us to realize that we are living through historic times and history-defining times. And what has been the impact of COVID on the data centers, their use, their expectation, future growth?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been several game changers along the way, and this is where I would normally put up a graph. From 2007 to 2016, we had a very slow and steady growth. By 2016, we became the largest concentration of data centers anywhere. And then we hit the growth spurts. The first growth spurt was 2017 when everybody started adopting the cloud. Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, and Oracle, and IBM. We went from being a primarily co-location where, companies would be leasing space in data centers to really the hyperscalers taking over a lot of space in building as they build out, Azure and AWS and Microsoft, the clouds and all those. So that was a big jump. And then we hit the COVID pandemic, and within 3 days of the start of the lockdown, programs like Microsoft Teams grew by 40 times. So everyone was at home and everyone was, you saw an internet spike that went like this. Well, we didn't have the capacity to really keep up with that, so there was another building boom there, and that lasted at several years to the point where we were cruising along, and these will sound like big numbers, but in what we do, it's pretty good numbers. We were like 3 billion, 4 billion, 3 billion a year in new commercial investment. And then we went like this to 7, and then we went to 10. We'll do 8 this year, $1 billion in investment. So it's significant. Now, today, while Loudoun County, we've slowed growth. I like to say that the data center industry is in the 3rd inning overall. In Loudoun County, we're at the 7th inning stretch. We're toward the end of our growth curve, and for a lot of reasons, and we can go into that. But AI has increased the demand for data center space like we have never seen before. It's insatiable, and our internal research would tell us that even at today's building pace, which is faster than we've ever seen before worldwide, even at today's building pace, the supply doesn't reach the demand for at least a decade. We think that there's going to be a continued growth spurt, again, not necessarily here, but worldwide. And that's going to be really important because you think about it, right? I mean, how are we all using information? We're recording this on the phone, and everybody has their phones, and we stream, and we do all these things, right? By 2027, about $8 trillion of the U.S. economy is going to be dependent on data centers and digital infrastructure. $8 trillion of our economy. So it's not really a matter of, do we need data centers? We do. It's a matter of where and how do we mitigate their impact. And that's really, that's the question that we're asking. This is something I've been tracking now since 2017. I wrote a white paper in 2017 saying that the future of the industry was going to be how do we figure out power generation, making sure that we're keeping the sustainability and green. How do we figure out the grid and, to make sure that we're able to deliver that power? And how do we figure out storage? And because, when we go to renewables, we have to be able to store that somewhere in order to, you can't use solar when it's dark. You can't, use wind when it's not. So it took a few years for my white paper to kind of come true, but that's where we are today. We are in a position today where the grid does not support the growth of technology. We're to a point today where we're not able to meet the power needs. And, we went from a situation where data centers were chasing latency and connectivity to today they're chasing power. That power, went from like number 4 on the list to number 1 on the list. So it's a really significant thing, and it's a topic that I've been passionate about for a long time. I think perception is that I brought all these data centers here, so I must hate the environment. But the reality is my job is the economy, right? That's my job is to build the economy. But I'm very passionate about energy, and I'm very passionate about the environment. And I picture it like a 3-legged stool. You really have to be able to balance all that. Because if you can't balance all 3 sides of that stool, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Right. So can you talk a little bit more about, and maybe you've covered it all, but why it is that we're sort of at the end of big growth in Loudoun in terms of data centers?
Well, I would say that we have been trying to manage the growth for several years, for a couple of reasons. One is that economic reason. I'm educated as an economist. Yeah, I pay a lot of attention to the numbers and trying to figure out exactly what do those numbers mean. I think that we don't want to be overly dependent on this revenue source than we were when I got here on the residential tax base. We have to have a balanced economy, so we've got to do that. I think the other challenges that come with that is land values. We have seen land values go from 850,000 an acre, and everybody thought that's really crazy, to now $4.2 million an acre. And what that does is that excludes a lot of uses. It makes it tough to build a flex product where you might go get your car fixed, or you might where your lawn mowers or your HVAC people. So there's a lot of real economic reasons why we don't want to overbuild. I think that there's there's a balance too. We've done a tremendous job of from day one, we have said we are not doing any data centers west of 15. We're just not going to do it. We've been reluctant to even do them in the transition zone. It's pretty focused in Eastern Loudoun, but I think that we want to. There's only so low the tax rate should go. There's only so many parcels that we can afford to give up and still have a balanced economy. So I think we've been trying to manage that growth for really I think since about 2019, and we've been doing it to varying amounts of success because of the demand. The demand is so high, especially for Ashburn, that it's made it tough, and the landowners look at that delta, right? I can either make $850 for my land, or I can make $4.2 million for my land. So there's a lot of market factors that have driven that, and it's something that we the board and economic development try to manage.
And I mean, as I understand it, as we look at the sort of total history of Loudoun County, those tensions between landowners wanting to be able to sort of maximize their profit on as they change their lives and want to go from being huge landowners to smaller landowners or not landowners at all, coupled with the zoning requirements that has played into all of this as well. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, no, it has, and we didn't update our comprehensive plan for about 20 years, which was probably about 17 years too long. And then that was a 4-year process, and then the zoning ordinance was a 4-year process, and so we're playing from behind a little bit. So we're just now catching up to the kind of zoning that is appropriate for the world in 2024. So I think that we've done a really good job over the last 8 years, but a lot happens in 8 years, and so it is a balance, and there's a lot of good that's come out of the revenue we're getting. Right, we're able to put a penny out of that really low 86.5. A penny of that's going to go to affordable housing initiatives. A penny of that goes to roads. We've been able to put about $1 billion of local money into roads. We're building great schools. I mean, really great schools, and funding them at a level that no one else in the Commonwealth can fund them at. So all of those things are really, really important and really, really good. But you have to seek out that balance, and you got to seek it out on a lot of levels. A social level and a fiscal level, and all of those things. Everything's it's kind of a juggling act to get that. But I always try to remember that when I got here, we had a really tough economy, and today we have what U.S. News and World Report says is the strongest local economy anywhere in the country. And so that's something that I think we can all be very proud of. AAA credit rating. When we were in New York with the bond rating agencies, they would tell us that if we could get 4 A's, we would. That our economy, our fiscal responsibility, our planning practices, all those things are that good. So So we as Loudoners have a lot to be proud of in that area.
Great. So I would venture to say that you are renowned beyond the county, even in terms of the work that you've done in this arena. So I'm curious as to whether there are other economic development groups, other places in the Commonwealth, in the country that come to you seeking advice, and how do you balance that with the needs of this county and your constituents with the needs of others?
Yeah, no, and listen, Loudoun is always going to be my first priority, and always has been, always will be. But I think we do have a responsibility as as public servants to share our knowledge. In government, we're famous for wanting to see how somebody else did it first, right? It's like we'll go, well, how did they handle that? What did they do? And what were the best practices? When I first started government, I heard the word best practices more than I can tell you. But no one has done what we do. No one has done this at the scale we've done. No one's faced the challenges we face. So I counsel communities all over the world. The president of Ghana, you might have heard something in the paper about that. The president of Ghana, approached me about, he wanted me to talk to them about, how we built this and what were the challenges. I've been to Dubai and India and all over Virginia. I work with other communities throughout Virginia to try to make sure, because it's like better for me and better for Loudoun if they stay in Virginia, right? Because I want more business throughout Virginia, because that takes a lot of pressure off of the rest of the Commonwealth. So we try to do that, but yeah, I try to be very as generous as possible with my time and my advice. And the number one thing I tell communities that are looking to get into data centers is, number one, define your opportunity. Like, if you're in Southwest Virginia, you don't need to have, 180 buildings. If you can get 2 or 3 data centers, it will significantly change the trajectory of your community. I mean, it just will. I mean, you have to remember, our budget surplus here is bigger than many of the budgets in other jurisdictions throughout the Commonwealth. So it's a matter of scale. How much can you take in your community? How much do you want? Define where you want them, and then stick to that. Like I said, I think we tried to do that, and we didn't do a great job of it. It kind of got away from us a little bit because of our zoning and our comprehensive plan and those kinds of things. But I do think that there are lessons learned, especially, don't build more than your infrastructure can handle. And then make sure that you understand the impacts, especially on surrounding land uses.
Great. Well, so for me, as we sort of look back at the history of Loudoun County, we see that the railroad brought electricity, and the popularity of the automobile brought paved roads, and the construction of Dulles Airport brought water and sewer lines out to Loudoun. And so when you think about this moment and this activity, recognizing that we're not, all the way through it, what kinds of changes of that ilk do you imagine the construction of the data centers and the proliferation of them here? We will look back on that as becoming significant, pieces of our history.
Yeah, I think that, the pace of change is so fast now. I mean, you think about, the early industrial revolutions, we're talking about 100-year spans. And then, it started to get to shorter, like 50 years. And, now the pace of change is measured in years, not decades. Mm-hmm. So I think that, one of our lasting legacies is going to be at the forefront of the digital transition. But I don't know that this is a moment. but I don't know if it is the end of anything, right? I mean, I think it's, it's going to be a significant piece of the future of society, the way that we use it and process information. But we've only begun to scratch the surface of what AI can do. And there are a lot of scary things about AI, As a member of the Board of Trustees at Northern Virginia Community College, we're grappling with, how do we make sure that people are really learning and not just, putting things in the chat GPT. I think that those a lot of things. But, think about what AI could do for reading x-rays or doing predictive medicine or, allowing for telehealth or, changing education or, giving people opportunities that they've never had before. I mean, there's a lot that has really come out of the digital revolution. And, I think that Loudoun should be proud to be on the forefront of that. That said, I think that we have an opportunity to leverage this success into a much broader and much more holistic way of life. Our success has allowed us to create new programs like workforce training programs inside my department, the Launch Loudoun Small Business Program, where we are delivering small business services to help really companies understand what it takes to, we call it start, scale, and soar. How do we do that? We've been able to launch a minority-owned business program that we didn't have before. The way that the board has decided to leverage this money, some of this excess money to, fast forward projects and give us a financial safety net unlike any other community around. So, I don't know that this is going to have the same lasting impact of Dulles Airport, but I do think that the digital transition, you can put that with the railroad and the auto and the airport and, and then, hopefully Metro as the next real game changer for us. So I think it's the latest in the long line of tremendous steps forward for Loudoun County.
Great. It gets me thinking about, and we've been to Disney World and done the Carousel of Progress ride, right? Where, and they are, your notion that the pace of change is so fast now is really underscored for me in that thinking, right? The Carousel of Progress, you sort of, there's the 1910s and then the 40s and then the 60s and then there's one more section and they just keep adding to it, right?
Yeah. Or you're on that ride and it starts slow and you get to now and you're kind of spinning around really fast.
Right.
That's kind of where we are.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting. Well, this has been an enlightening conversation. I hope you all have learned as much as I have, and I also hope that you know that in the exhibits throughout the museum, the one in this room right here, and especially in the timeline downstairs, there's bits and pieces of information about this kind of change and transition, all sprinkled throughout, even the history exhibits here. And so with that, I hope you'll join me in thanking Buddy for joining us this evening.
No, and thank you. Thank you for everything you do in this community. I mean, we have so much to be proud of, and our history needs to be on display. I mean, it needs to be the rock that we're really building everything else on. And thank you all for being kind and your patience tonight. It's really a great conversation.